Museum's 24th annual Chautauqua. The Swanndale Museum, if you don't know, is part of the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, and we are very excited to bring this event back to you in person after 2 years gone due to COVID. Like I said before, just some housekeeping. If you need to use the bathroom, we have them over there. If you would like some water, we have some right here. And please pick up a schedule of events. In the back, we have plenty more events happening today and a lot more happening tomorrow. And then Chautauqua continues on the 10th and the 11th at our other HCA-run museum, the Newcastle Courthouse Museum. And they are doing 2 more days of Chautauqua, which is very exciting. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. But we will begin with our first presentation of today, and I have the pleasure of introducing Eric Mease. A little bit about our presenter. He is an American history buff with a specific interest in the early American period. He is a retired paralegal from the DuPont Company's Intellectual Property Group and a graduate of the Pennsylvania State University with a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in the arts and liberal studies from the University of Delaware. Mease is a member of the Board of Trustees from the Historical Society of Cecil County and a past member of the Board of Directors of the Historic Elk Landing Foundation, and both of which are based in Elton, Maryland. He has taught continuing education classes at Cecil College, Hartford Community College, and Delaware Technical and Community College around a wide range of topics, including the American Civil War, America's founding fathers and mothers, the Declaration of Independence, Alexander Hamilton, of course, a comparison between the founding of Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Jamestown, Virginia, American slavery, and the race to the moon. That's very impressive. He is married with 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. And besides history, his hobbies include camping, biking, and long-distance running. He has 3 marathons and a 70 half marathon medal adorning his basement walls, which I find very impressive because I could never. And finally, we're very excited to have Eric here today. And this program is partially funded by a grant from the Delaware Humanities, a statewide program of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The Delaware Humanities is an independent organization, an independent agency, and promotes understanding and appreciation of the humanities and their relevance to current issues of public concern. Any nonprofit group or organization in Delaware can apply for a grant from the Delaware Humanities. They're a wonderful Delaware organization. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and for that welcome. Rather impressive resume, wow. I charge extra for that. Yes, we are here courtesy of the Delaware Humanities. We have to make mention of that. They sign the checks, and I have 4 grandchildren, so it will be well spent very quickly. Hamilton, more than a musical. Word of warning as we begin. I play, if it works, 3 songs from the musical. There are several nasty words in some of these. In one of them, Peanut Gallery is very active here today. We're going to have them all thrown out here in about 5 minutes. And the third one that we play, there's a couple of words that are bleeped, but you can probably figure them out. But I just want to let everybody know that's coming. Also, watch for 3 Delaware references. I'll point them out, but we'll be moving rather quickly, so we don't want you to miss that. So, who is Alexander Hamilton, and why should we care? Yes, he was a Revolutionary War veteran. He founded the New York Post newspaper. He founded the Coast Guard. He founded what is now Chase Manhattan Bank. He did a lot of things. But the most important thing that he did, and what I would like you to take home with you today, is the fact that he was appointed the first Secretary of the Treasury under the new Constitution with George Washington. It is because of Hamilton that we have the economy that we have today, the world's largest and strongest ever. Yeah, we have our ups and downs. We're going through some rough patches now, but it will make it through. And it's thanks really to the work over 200 years ago of Alexander Hamilton. So let's begin. We're going to have some group participation. Didn't know you were going to do that, did you? Anyway, we're going to be about 6 slides of the first couple of verses of the first song of the musical. It will have on the top of the slides, us, and we will all say that together. I had a group last week. It took them 20 minutes to figure it out. If it says us, it means everybody. Then at the end, there's one that says just me, and that will be moi, okay? Are there any questions? Not from you two. Okay, so we're going to say this together. How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by providence, impoverished and squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar? The $10 founding father, without a father, got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. By 14, they placed him in charge of a trading charter. And every day, while slaves were being slaughtered and carted away across the waves, he struggled and kept his guard up. Inside, he was longing for something to be a part of. The brother was ready to beg, steal, borrow, or barter. Then a hurricane came and devastation reigned. Our man saw his future dripping down the drain, put a pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain, a testament to his pain. Well, the word got around. They said, this kid's insane, man. Took up a collection just to send him to the mainland. Get your education, don't forget from whence you came, and the world's gonna know your name. What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton, and there's a million things I haven't done. Just you wait. Just you wait. You can add to your resume, rapper now. Don't quit your day job. So the wait is over for the last 7 years now or so. Hamilton is everywhere on such diverse publication as the Smithsonian, the monthly newsletter of the Smithsonian Institution, and Rolling Stone magazine. He was also the cover story a couple of years back on the History magazine for National Geographic. Taking the world by storm. In that Rolling Stone magazine, it was noted that he was Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote the musical, received a $625,000 MacArthur Genius Grant. Now that grant went to high school students, especially in the New York area, to help them study and preferably enjoy U.S. history by allowing them to be creative with songs or poems or raps or skits or whatever. And maybe they take a little bit more interest and learn a little bit more from what they're studying. Won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, earned a record-breaking 16 Tony Award nominations. He's even on Disney Plus. He's been on there for about 2 years now. There was some talk about taking him off, but I believe he's still on there. I have to ask my kids. Anyway, of those 16 nominations, the play won 11, including Best Musical. The Grammys awarded him the Best Theater Album in 2016. And if you want to talk about stuffy history organizations, it doesn't get much more stuffier than the U.S. Capitol Historical Society. They even recognized Manuel Miranda for his play by his unique ability to encourage new audiences with our history. And that kind of sums up why I like the musical. Yeah, issues with rap and issues with, that kind of thing, but hip hop. But it has sparked and continues to spark an interest among kids in U.S. history, which has been missing for about 30 years now, mostly because of professors such as I who don't know how to teach it right. But anyway, and he also received the President's Merit Award in the Latin Grammys, which Miranda went down and accepted in a very emotional speech. So, who was this guy, Alexander Hamilton? Early life. He was born on Mease, a minuscule, microscopic, tiny island in the Caribbean. It's so small that they had to combine it with St. Kitts to form a country, the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. His parents were Rachel Fawcett Levine and James Hamilton. Rachel was the daughter of French Huguenots who left France for religious purposes. They came down to the Caribbean, settled in St. Croix. Her father was a doctor, acquired some land, a small sugar plantation. They did enslave some individuals there to work that plantation. She married a guy named John Levine. They had a child together named Peter. The marriage fell apart. He was abusive. It got to the point where he threw her in jail for a little while. She filed for divorce. Divorce was very hard to get in those days. We're talking about the early 1700s, especially in the Caribbean. This is a Dutch colony, I believe. And it was, yeah, you can get a divorce, but you can't marry again. You can't procreate again. So they had got the divorce, but it hadn't quite gone through yet. And when she met up with James Hamilton, they had 2 children together. This is frowned upon by society and resulted later on in some political fights where this kind of stuff was being said about Hamilton, in this case by our future second president, John Adams. Technically it was correct, but it was still nasty. So James Hamilton skips town. Hamilton was a ne'er-do-well. He came from Scotland with high hopes. Become a businessman, make some money, be successful, raise a family, and keep them well. But everything he touched failed. And so eventually he was up to his eyeballs in debt and didn't do very well. So in order to keep the debtors away from his family, he left, leaving Rachel and the 2 boys to fend for themselves. Now, the Hamiltons, Rachel and the kids knew where he was, but the debtors didn't, and that was the only thing that mattered. He skips town. Rachel moves back to St. Croix, moves in with her parents for a little bit, and then acquired some land, had a house, had a good job. When they died, she inherited their land and their money. This is going to take off, I think. But then things were going really well for a while, and then fever went through the Caribbean. Everybody was affected. Again, no antibiotics, no shots, anything in those days. The Hamiltons came down with it. Severe case. Rachel dies. She dies holding Alexander in her arms. It left a very big impression on him, and he remembered it and wrote about it in later years. Left them orphaned. James Jr. and Alexander are orphans. Now, you think, well, wait a minute. Rachel had some money. She had some land. What was the problem? Well, you remember that divorce that didn't quite go through? Peter got the inheritance, the son. And he ended up off in South Carolina and then later in Georgia. When he died, he left 150 pounds sterling to Alexander and 150 pounds sterling to his brother. But they really didn't have any contact in that time. So anyway, they're orphaned. They moved in with a cousin. About 3 months later, he committed suicide. They moved in with an aunt and uncle who had a large family. So everybody had to work, including James and Alexander, who were early teens, mid-teens. James became an apprentice, became a carpenter. Alexander went to work as a clerk in an import-export business in St. Croix, making a couple of pennies a week. During his lunch hour one day, he decided, I gotta have something to do here. He grabbed the account books, financial statements of the company. He starts going through them just for kicks. He had about a 6th grade education, really good at math. And he starts looking at the books, and he's making corrections. Puts the books back. Bookkeeper finds it, sees the corrections. Who's been messing with my books? Nobody admits it. Takes it to the boss. Somebody's messing around with my books. The boss asks. Alexander goes, yeah, I did it. Bookkeeper goes, you know, they're correct. The boss goes, yeah, they're correct. We have a new bookkeeper. And Alexander, at the ripe old age, about 15, 16, becomes a bookkeeper for this import-export business. And he was so good that when the owners were off island to do business, they left him in charge. He was running this thing as a teenager. Things go along again for a little while, but bad times are always close to Alexander and his family. A hurricane goes through in August of 72. I think he's about 17 years old at this point. Remember, no Weather Channel in those days. Not even the app. And nobody was prepared for when these storms would happen. So there was almost total it was really messed up. So Hamilton writes a letter to his father, which is why we know he knew where he was. And he describes this storm. And check out some of the language that he uses. The most dreadful of hurricanes. Total desolation. That's the word I was looking for. Total desolation of nature. Perpetual lightning. Crash of the falling houses. Ear-piercing shrieks of the distress. You can hear it. You can see it. This language is very vivid. Families running around the streets. Sick, exposed to the keenness of water and air. Misery and all its hideous shapes spread over the whole face of the country. That's pretty good stuff, especially for a 17-year-old with a 6th grade education. Well, anyway, Hamilton takes the letter. Before he sent it, he took the letter to his pastor at a local Presbyterian church to have him look at it for grammar and spelling. His name was Pastor Hugh Knox. First Delaware reference. Hugh Knox was a Scottish immigrant, landed in Newcastle, Delaware, ended up in Middletown as a teaching assistant, screwed up something and was kicked out of town, and ended up in New Jersey, and went to the went to College of New Jersey, which became Princeton, and studied theology under the president of that college, Aaron Burr Sr. So anyway, Knox says that Delaware. Anyway, so Knox then shows it to Hamilton's employer, and they publish it in the newspaper. It gains a lot of attention, and they literally take up a collection to send Hamilton to the mainland to be educated to be a doctor. I say, look, you get your education and you come back and share your knowledge and help out your people. Okay. So, in the musical, he goes off to New York City. He's riding the waves in the boat at the stern with the bellowing sails and the hair going back. Not yet. He first goes to Boston. There's a fire on the boat, and the facilities to repair said fire are only in Boston, not in New York. So then he goes to New York, right? No. Elizabeth City, New Jersey. Now, I don't want to disparage New Jersey or Elizabeth City, but it ain't Manhattan. He goes to school there, to a prep school, Elizabeth Academy. Does very well, breezes through it, straight A's. Looking for a college. Tries to get in at College of New Jersey. He wants to do a 4-year program in 2 years. They laughed at him and told him to go away. So he went to New York, finally. and entered King's College, which is now Columbia University. Spends 2 years there. Lives off campus. Can't afford to live in the dorm. So who does he live with? Hercules Mulligan. You've seen the musical, listen to the play. He's plays a big part in that. He, like some of the others in Hamilton's life, was an Irish immigrant. He was a tailor. We're going to come back to that. He was very much a patriot and into the rebel cause. He was part of the Committee of Correspondence, which was a communications network up and down the East Coast. I remember we're living in a 3-mile-per-hour world then. Communications were only as fast as the fastest horse. So that communication effort was very important to the revolutionary cause. Hamilton, up to this point, was a loyalist. He was writing editorials in newspapers, voicing his opinion about that. This 19-year-old kid, like anybody's going to care. But he's doing this, and people aren't taking note of it. Mulligan turns him into a patriot, into the rebel. Mulligan is also a spy for George Washington. This is where the Taylor piece comes in. Mulligan is married to the niece of a British admiral during the British occupation of New York. The admiral sends all his officers when they need uniform repair or alteration or whatever. He sends them to Mulligan. So, officer comes in, puts his stuff down on the table. Mulligan says, okay, what do you want? A couple of buttons, a couple of decorations. All right, when do you need it? Well, we got to have it by next week because we're going to go kick Washington's butt across New Jersey. Oh, really? Okay, we can do that. So these guys are telling him all kinds of information. He writes it down. He then wraps it in material, cloth, packages it, and gives it to his enslaved individual named Cato. Cato takes it to Washington. Now, because Mulligan is working for both sides, so to speak, he can get through the British lines and he can get through the American lines. No problem. So Cato has these letters of entrance, and he just takes this stuff over to Washington. On 2 occasions, Cato is captured. On one of those occasions, he is tortured, thrown in prison and tortured. He never talks. He never gives up Mulligan. Mulligan himself is imprisoned at one point on suspicion of spying. The admiral has him released. You can imagine what that conversation was like. So anyway, he played a pretty big part, not only in Hamilton's life, but in the life of the Revolution. So 1775, war begins. Hamilton signs up for the New York militia unit in Manhattan. He joins a militia unit that is specializing in artillery. Hamilton didn't know anything about artillery, but that's okay because they didn't have any anyway. So Hamilton decided, well, we got to solve this problem. So he organizes a bunch of guys from the unit. On the cover of darkness, they go down to the fort down at the end of the island, still there, and they steal cannons. They take them up the island and deliver them to Washington. Washington's impressed. He has read his editorial contributions. He's, of course, heard from Mulligan about him. And he likes his gall, and he likes his writing. So he puts him on his staff, aide-de-camp. Eventually, he attains the rank of lieutenant colonel. He's very valuable to Washington. Not only can he write, but he knows French. Remember, his mother was French. He grew up knowing French and English. So, when there's correspondence or communications of any kind with people of the likes of Lafayette or Rochambeau, Hamilton does the communicating. He also writes up most of Washington's orders to his general staff and to his officers. Some of those orders were not originating with Washington, but that's okay. He looked them over and said, yeah, I guess this is good. Hamilton was kind of freelancing. But anyway, very valuable. So, long story short, 1781, October, the British are bottled up, General Cornwallis, in Yorktown, Virginia, and Washington and Rochambeau and Lafayette head after him to cut him off at the pass, so to speak. This is sung about in the musical, and this is, if we can get this to work, how it goes. This isn't really great volume. The world turned upside down indeed. 2 years later, Treaty of Paris is signed, officially ending the war. Post-war, Hamilton goes back to New York. Drops out of school. Studies with some attorneys and passes the bar in New York. Appointed to the Continental Congress, fought for congressional power to tax the states under the Articles of Confederation. He hates the Congress. They don't do anything. And they, I didn't get a laugh last time on that one. And I'll write that down. And he starts immediately starting to work for a new constitution. He attends the Annapolis Convention, which is the precursor to the National Convention in Philly, and then is elected to that as well. He gives a 6-hour speech at the convention outlining his proposed constitution. He's done. He sits down. Everybody says, "Thank you very much. Let's move on." And they skip the whole thing. Ignore him completely. Anyway, he does support the new Constitution. He writes 50 of the 90-some Federalist Papers, along with John Jay and James Madison, which are still used and quoted by court rulings to this day. And then, of course, he's elected the first Secretary of the Treasury. We back up a couple of years. During the war, as referenced in the song, Hamilton gets married. Elizabeth Schuyler. She comes from a very wealthy Dutch family, upstate New York. Her father is General Philip Schuyler, who for a while was the commander of the Northern Army, the Continental Army. He doesn't stay in that job very long, but he's very well respected and very wealthy. They have a child in those first few years, and in fact, they have 8 children eventually. After Hamilton is appointed Secretary of the Treasury, they first have the seat of government in New York City, then it's down in Philadelphia. So Elizabeth didn't think much of government work and her husband being tied up all the time doing everything in the government. So she spent a lot of time with her parents and sisters and brothers upstate New York. And Hamilton was busy working. Well, one day, enter Maria Reynolds. Maria Reynolds was a young woman who came to Hamilton's office disheveled, shall we say. Clothes messed up, hair messed up, crying. And she says her husband is being abusive. He's threatening to do some more. And he's also threatening to take away their child and never see them again. I need some help. I need some money to get back on my feet. He sees his mother in her. He goes, "Okay, I'll give you some money. But I got to finish some things up. You go to your house. I'll do my thing here. Go back to my house, and then I'll deliver it to you." Okay. So he does that. Goes to her house, knocks on the door. "Hey, I have your money." "Oh, come on in." One thing leads to another. And we have the first political sex scandal in our 2-year-old nation. And it continues for like 9 or 10 months. This wasn't a one-off thing. They keep seeing each other. And every time Elizabeth Hamilton is out of town, and sometimes if she's in town, they're getting it together, so to speak. And this continues, like I said, for almost a year, until one day Hamilton gets a letter. The letter is from Maria's husband. He says, "I know what you're doing to my wife, and you can keep doing it, but you're going to pay me $1,000. Hamilton could have let it go, could have cut it off, could have said, "I dare you," or whatever. But he doesn't. He pays the $1,000. One of the reasons is that Maria says, "Yeah, he'll do what he says he's going to do. He'll tell your wife and everybody who will listen." So he pays, and he keeps paying, again, for almost a year. Until somebody finds out, or they think they found out. There's a meeting. Word got out, and I'm not sure how this happened, but that Hamilton was paying somebody off. They thought that it was speculating on government bonds, insider trading, which is illegal now and was illegal then. So they approach him, and the they are Senator James Monroe, Virginia, future president, Congressman Frederick Muhlenberg, Speaker of the House from Pennsylvania, and Abraham Venable, another congressman from Pennsylvania. They confront Hamilton with the speculation story. Hamilton goes, no, not speculation. That would have ruined his honor. We're not going to unpack that, but he said no. He comes clean with this group, but he says, "Look, I'll tell you exactly what's happening in detail, but you got to promise not to tell anybody." They promise, so he tells them everything. The problem was there was a guy there taking notes. Monroe's secretary. Monroe's secretary didn't take the oath. So he leaks a speculation story. And Hamilton is just furious. This really messes up his reputation. And this is all important to these guys. Sex scandals are one thing, but to be called out as being a crook is beyond reproach. So Hamilton comes clean to the public. He writes this very large pamphlet, almost a book, called The Charge of Speculation. And he denies the charge and then explains exactly what he's doing. He's ruined, essentially. Also during that time period, his first son, Philip, comes of age. And he has an encounter with a guy by the name of George Eaker in 1801. The Jeffersonian Republicans are in power. And the 4th of July, they're celebrating this fact. And this Eaker fella gave a speech disparaging Alexander Hamilton. I mean, really rough stuff. Not that he didn't deserve it, and it wasn't true, but it was really rough. So Philip decides he's going to defend his father's honor. He goes after Eaker. Eaker's in a play. He runs into his box and starts reaming him out. It results in Eaker challenging him to a duel. Hamilton goes home to his father and says, "What am I going to do?" Hamilton goes, "Here's my guns." He said, "Look, you got to be a gentleman about this. You cannot shoot this man. You must shoot in the air. If he's a gentleman, he will too." Great. So they go off to Weehawken, New Jersey with Hamilton's guns. They try to work things out as the process requires. They can't. They pace off. They turn. Hamilton shoots in the air. Eaker doesn't, drills him in the ribs. 2 days later, he's dead. Back to politics. 1790, where are we as a country? Well, we're occupying the East Coast. New capital, new president, new Congress, new Supreme Court. Well, we'll have a new Supreme Court soon. And we have a new presidential cabinet. The cabinet as an entity is not included in the Constitution. This is something that Washington came up with, similar to his general staff. Also very similar to what was the Governor's Council in Virginia, advisors to both the colonial and Commonwealth governors. So on that group of Henry Knox, Secretary of War, Edmund Randolph, another Virginian, former governor of Virginia, Hamilton, and Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State. Randolph is Attorney General. Right away, there's a crisis. The debt. The war has cost a lot of money. They borrowed a lot of money from the Netherlands and especially France. And now it's payback time. So Hamilton says, well, let's consolidate all this debt and pay it back as a country. It will unite us in this goal, and it's a good goal, and it also help our credit rating. Jefferson goes, no. And he says, well, you're swindling the future.